Hey gamers, it's your favorite illustrator slash mad scientist, and today I'm taking some bootleg Lego sets from a friend and turning them into a horrible monstrosity. This wasn't my original intention. My original plan was just to construct something and then, well, you'll see what happened. You'll see my descent into chaos. The three Pokemon are the three starter Pokemon from Generation 1, and of course my favorite is Charmander, so I am rooting for Charmander. We'll see how that goes. Now, who's this Pokemon? Whoa! We got Charmander on our first go, gamers. I cannot express to you how absolutely delighted I am. I am going to get Charmander out of there because homeboy not doing so well in there. Save him. Now, after using the Force to construct my beautiful little boy, let's set him to the side and pick another Pokemon. So here's the second Pokeball. Who's that Pokemon? Is it Squirtle? You bet your butts it is. It is everybody's favorite water tortoise, here to wish us a beautiful day from his horrible prison. Rather than assemble the whole thing this time, I thought I'd show you a little trick. It's called the Macarena assemblage method, in which you just give it a little shaka, and then a perfectly formed model falls right out. Professionals don't want you to know this trick, but it is 100% true. Now, on to our final beautiful boy. Who's this Pokemon? Is it Bulbasaur? I'd be more surprised if it wasn't Bulbasaur. Now let's assemble Bulbasaur with the power of friendship and love. That did most of Bulbasaur, but friendship and love can't keep plants alive, trust me, I've tried. Instead, let's give him a little watering from his previously assembled friend, a Squirtle. Hey, that worked. How handy. Alright, now that we've assembled all three of our beautiful boys, I think that they look like really close friends. In fact, I'd like them to be closer friends. Why have three separate Pokemon who all don't really look as good as the originals when we can have one solid Pokemon that retains elements from all of the originals? So as you can see, I have disassembled the Lego sets, and I am now reassembling them into the most horrifying Frankenstein's monster I can possibly imagine. I wound up kinda going for a centaur type vibe. I thought that Bulbasaur would make an excellent base for our horrible creature just for stability's sake, and also because, let's be real, the Charmander and Squirtle bodies were boring, so I wasn't gonna keep those in the final version. I repurposed a lot of parts in different places. As an example, Squirtle's legs became some cool giraffe-like horns on Bulbasaur's head. Charmander's tail became the horrible spinal column of this awful beast. Homeboy ended up with 3 heads and 6 legs, which I think is an appropriate amount of limbs for any sort of PokéMon-strosity. I wanted to make sure that final product retained elements of all 3, so I tried to balance it out pretty well. So Bulbasaur's the primary head and the base of the guy, but he's got the Charmander fire type situation going on, and Charmander's arms as well, which, you know, makes sense. They've got the Squirtle turtle shell, and also some powerful Squirtle horns. And check it out, I used almost all the pieces except for just a few little greebles. Our boy is done and he is beautiful, but I want to honor him in some way. I think he deserves a royal portrait to be added to the Nintendo Pokemon Hall of Fame. Because obviously this is the next Pokemon that they're going to bring out. I don't know why they'd ever go for anything different. I am immortalizing my horrible creation in the form of art. Wow. I used the actual body structure as inspiration for the creature. So I basically just drew the parts of this thing pretty similarly to how I draw them if I was drawing the individual Pokemon, and then just kind of mashed them together like I was playing with clay. You can see that I took some liberties with a couple of joints, features, and shapes, but, you know, I'm not perfect. This is how I'm stylizing it. I also exaggerated a couple of properties. As an example, I made Bulbasaur's flower open with flame coming out of it. I thought that was a good way to kind of incorporate both characters. And then also, I curled the ends of the leaves so that they look like the little spiral at the end of Squirtle's tail, so Squirtle's a little bit in there as well, which I think is a great way to represent all 3 of their powers and cool, unique vibes. You'll notice in the original there's a third arm that's sort of in the middle because there was no other way for me to make that joint with the pieces that I had. But I didn't want to draw that in the final piece. You'll notice I got rid of it pretty early on, and I decided to just change it into an interesting shell section. Sorry, not sorry. It looks way better this way. It was starting to lean a little bit too into the, it was starting to look a little bit like, I also thought it'd be fun to incorporate Bulbasaur's little, like, birthmark patterning thing onto all three of the heads, so that's a element that kind of features in all three. I think it's a cute little vibe. It like makes them all look like they're part of the same creature as opposed to what it actually is, which is three separate things smashed together. I also thought it'd be a good idea to add a little Pokemon trainer for scale. For scale, and also to let you guys know how you should be reacting to this thing with awe and an appropriate dosage of perilous mortal dread. I think that those are the two emotions that best suit it. It like viewing the sublime, something so beautiful but also terrible that it provokes a great sense of fear but also like joy. Moral of the story, our little guy here is a force of nature and should be respected. I think I'm going to put him by the Skater Beard that I made earlier. Skater Beard and the Pokemon-strosity have a beautiful place together on my shrine of abominations, aberrations, and amalgamations. When it came to coloring this thing, I will admit that I got a bit stumped multiple times because all of the three starters, they're beautiful. They've got these bright jewel-like colors, and they're really, really bright and really, really saturated. And though it's beautiful color design separately, together they start to get a little bit much. So in order to kind of avoid making this thing look like an eyesore, I managed to track down a nice color palette on Coolers. And I used that to sort of make sure that all the colors were like more in harmony and just to restrict my color palette when I was painting this thing so I could at least pretend to have some element of color theory running through this overtaxed illustration brain of mine. Luckily, the color palette that I chose, I think this one's really nice, and it actually worked out very well with my purposes. You might go, oh, you're cheating. You've made Squirtle like a light blue, and that color's not on the color palette, but au contraire, my beautiful, beautiful friends. It's the color on the far right, but I just lightened it up a little bit. I'm taking some liberties with values here, because again, we've got shading going on, but I'm trying to stay within the general color square that these colors fall on. And I'm only really diverging when I need to. Like, as an example, in order to make the shell area, I had to combine a couple of colors. Honestly, the point with color palettes, especially in final illustrations, is to help you. If you're sticking to a color palette completely, that's a color palette challenge, which is cool and wonderful and all. But if you're doing a full illustration where the color palette challenge isn't the point, then I think you have more than enough right to diverge from the path. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with the background. Well, that's a lie. I knew what I wanted to do with the background. I wanted to leave it a white void and have nothing in it because I didn't want to bother with the background. But I thought that would be a bit of a disservice to our beautiful, wonderful freak of nature. I could probably get away with just defining a couple of blades of grass, putting a vague green plane in the background, and then darkening around the edges. And luckily for me, you'll see that that works pretty well. It's nice that it's a nighttime scene as well, because that means I can really amp up the intensity of the flames and also add some rim lighting, which if you guys know me, you know that I can't go a single piece without adding some of that beautiful, beautiful rim lighting. You don't technically need rim lighting for every single one of your pieces, but what is a world without it, my friends? It makes everything look so delicious. So when shading this piece, I completely kind of forgot that I had a ready-made 3D model right in front of me that I could have used to define some of the shapes. sort of do a little bit of reference. But you know what? Life is what it is. So I wound up doing a lot of the shading from imagination. I think I did okay. To finalize the background, I added some nice textures and shadows and just kind of mixed up the paint values a bit so that the figure in the middle would stand out a bit more. Added some little lines around the edges of the figures and where there would be like creases or anything like that in order to determine areas of, you know, ambient inclusion and stuff. And also make it so that I didn't have to render that much. This was sort of a cartoony blend of line and form that I sometimes like to do just because it's a lot faster than an actual painting, and from a distance, it looks a lot like an actual painting, so it's lazy, but it works. To finish it off, I added some teensy little details such as a scale texture and some little stars in the background. I actually really like how this piece turned out. I think the lighting is a little bit weird, but it's not really a scene, it's not meant to be outdoors, so you know what, it's fine. Good enough. Now, let's take a beautiful final look at my horrible, awful creations, and I'll see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe share this with somebody you know. It really helps my channel. Again, I am on that 1,000 followers climb, so if you're able to support me in any way, I super appreciate it. The full version of this will be available for download on my Patreon. Consider subscribing. The full quality version of this document for download will be available on my Patreon, so feel free to check that out if you want to. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. Adios!